I'll read you a little extract from my new book, Sapphire Battersea. It was a new, large, 3-storied house, very grand and imposing. "It's very fine," I said. "Yes, indeed it is," said Mrs. Brisket proudly. She opened the painted iron gate and we walked up the red-tiled path. I put one foot on the snowy white steps, but Mrs. Brisket tugged me back by the hem of my skirt. "Not the front steps, girl. We never ever go in the front door." I stared at her. How were we supposed to get into the house? Climb through the windows? "We go down the area steps at the side." She grabbed me and steered me towards them. I glimpsed a garden at the back with a great green lawn and an ornate white iron sofa padded with cushions, but I knew enough now to realise I'd never be reclining there. Mrs. Brisket whisked me through the basement door. Suddenly, I felt almost at home. The corridor was dark, painted cream and brown. I smelled familiar scents of soda and blacklead. I walked into a large kitchen, very similar to Mama's old domain at the hospital. I stood there, quivering, because it was so very like, with its scrubbed table and shining pans. And yet not like at all, because Mama wasn't there. There was just Mrs. Brisket and a strange pale woman in a print frock who was sitting at the table eating an enormous hunk of bread and cheese. "Ah, here you are at last," she said, springing up. "Let's have a look at her." She seized hold of me, dragging me downwards towards the window so she could get a proper look at me. She pulled a comical face as if she didn't like what she saw. I was tempted to pull her face back, but decided I had better be cautious. She didn't look as cheery as the butcher's boy. If Mrs. Brisket reminded me of meat, then this new woman was definitely potatoes. She had a pale, lumpy face with little warts here and there, like eyes in a potato. Her figure resembled a whole sackful of them. Mrs. Brisket's whalebone stays kept her figure solid, but if this creature wore corsets, they'd long given up attempting to contain her. "This can't be the new maid," she said, prodding my face with a finger, turning me left and right. "She's just a child. She can't be old enough, Mrs. B. She's 14, believe it or not. I know she's a skinny little thing, but we'll just have to fatten her up. Her name's Hetty Feather, though she tries to call herself something outrageous. What was it again, child?" "My name is Sapphire Battersea," I announced firmly. The two women started chuckling as if I'd cracked a joke. "Oh, yes, and I'm the Queen of Sheba," said Potato Woman, bobbing a mock curtsy. "Sapphire Battersea, indeed." "It isn't a comical name at all. I don't know why you're laughing," I said indignantly. This made them laugh even more. "Hoity-toity! Still, what can you expect with that hair? Well, we've been lumbered with a right dud, but I suppose we'll have to make the best of it. Now, listen to me, missy. I'm Sarah, the parlour maid. Mrs. Brisket rules the kitchen, and I rule the rest of the house. You're to do as we say. Do you understand? Now come and have a bite to eat, and then I'll take you to meet the master." I sat down at the table between the two great women. I stared in astonishment at the food. It was simple enough, cold meat and cheese and bread, but the portions were huge. Mrs. Brisket cut me a huge slab of meat that would have fed 5 foundlings for a week, and buttered me a slice of bread so thickly that my teeth made dents in the yellow when I took a bite. There was strange lumpy brown jam, too. I tried a spoonful and spluttered, my eyes streaming. "What's up, girl?" "This jam tastes very sharp, ma'am," I said. "Jam? It's pickles, you ninny." "Don't she know what pickles are?" said Sarah. "This one doesn't know anything. She's so quaint in her ways, I'm starting to wonder if she's simple." I was too dispirited to argue with her. I had always been the cleverest in my year. Well, perhaps first equal when Polly was at the hospital. I was used to thinking myself bright and sharp-witted. Even Matron Pig-Faced Peters and Matron Stinking Bottomley remarked on my intelligence, saying I was as sharp and sly as a cartload of monkeys. But now that I was out in this new topsy-turvy world, I realised I had to start learning all over again. I didn't know the simplest things. As a child, I'd longed to visit the pink and yellow and green foreign lands on the geography map hanging on the classroom wall. But now I realised that my own country was a totally foreign land to me. I did not know the language, the terrain, or any of the customs. "What's the matter with you now, child?" said Mrs. Brisket. "You're not about to cry again, are you? I told you, I can't abide tears." "She's just wanting attention, so take no notice," said Sarah. Their talking about me as if I wasn't even there made the tears roll down my face. I could not be Sapphire Battersea here. I wasn't even Hetty Feather. I was simply child or girl or missy. It made me feel very small. "Come now, no tears," said Mrs. Brisket. "Have a spoonful of syrup. That'll sweeten you up." I still hadn't eaten more than a mouthful of meat and strange pickles, but I took the proffered sticky spoonful and sucked hard. The sweetness soothed me. I licked my lips, remembering the spoonfuls of sugar Mama had once pressed upon me as secret treats. "Aha, she likes that all right," said Mrs. Brisket. "That's a good girl. Stop that silly crying now. You don't want to go and see the master all over tear stains. It won't give the right impression at all." They fussed over me considerably for this meeting with the master. Sarah took me out through the back door to the privy and waited for me to relieve myself. The privy was very dark, and as I squatted there, something terrifying ran over my foot. "Lord save us, stop that squealing. Whatever is it, Hetty Feather?" "I don't know. Something touched me." "Don't be silly, child. It will just have been a spider, or maybe a mouse." "Oh, help!" I screamed louder and hurtled out of the privy. The hospital's facilities had been dark and depressing, but they were in their own special building, free of wildlife. I resolved to severely limit my visits to the privy. Maybe I could commandeer a chamber pot and use it privately. Sarah caught hold of me, dragged me into the scullery, and held a cloth under the tap. She then proceeded to wipe my face fiercely while I wriggled and squirmed. "Hold still, child. You're covered in soot and smuts from the train." "I'm not a baby. I can do my own face," I protested indignantly. "You certainly act like a baby," said Sarah. "And whatever's happened to your hair? You're a right little mophead. Come here." She whipped off my cap, combed my hair with her hard fingers, and then pulled it up into a knot, securing it with a couple of pins from her own head. Then she jammed my cap back on, pulling it down to my eyebrows, and twitched at my apron to straighten it. "There, you still look a funny little creature, but at least you're clean and tidy," she said. She turned my shoulders to show me off to Mrs. Brisket. "Will she do, Mrs. B?" "She'll have to," said Mrs. Brisket, "though I still think she's going to give the master a bit of a surprise." Sarah led me out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I was very nervous now, but I took comfort in the fact that I had something in common with this mysterious master. We were both writers. Miss Smith had told him all about me. Maybe he wouldn't treat me like a servant at all. I wouldn't be a maid of all work, of any work. Maybe he would let me sit in his study and write beside him. We could have interesting conversations about the joys of composition. Then at the end of the day, he'd read my stories and give me gentle advice and encouragement. The idea was so beguiling that I almost believed it. I skipped up the stairs eagerly, scarcely taking in the green embossed wallpaper and the many painted portraits staring down at me, eyebrows raised. "That's it, look lively," said Sarah. She led me along a crimson carpeted landing and gave my face another polish with the hem of her apron. Then she knocked on a door. We stood waiting.